What if there was something so terrifying that not even an army of 100 armed men could survive a single night? January 1940, Kibini Mountains, on the border between Finland and the Soviet Union. An entire company of Soviet soldiers vanishes overnight. When the Finns find the bodies, what they see leaves them in absolute silence. These aren't bullet wounds. They're not grenade shrapnel. They are mutilations. Limbs torn off, torsos hanging from trees, as if something primitive, ferocious, and impossible had hunted those men like prey. The military reports vanished. The Soviet Union never officially explained what happened, and the Sámi elders, native people of that cursed region, would only shake their heads and whisper a forbidden word. Werewolf, the war werewolf, November 30th, 1939. The Soviet Union invades Finland with overwhelming force. 450,000 soldiers, 2,000 tanks, against only 160,000 poorly equipped Finns. Stalin believed the conquest would take just a few weeks. He was wrong. What Stalin didn't know is that Finland harbored secrets older than any ideology. Secrets buried in the frozen forests of Karelia. Secrets the Sámi people knew and feared. Major General Johan Voldemar Haglund, a World War I veteran, an experienced, cold, calculating commander. He is placed in charge of the Finnish 12th Division, led by Colonel Lauri Tiainen. 8,000 men to defend 70 miles of border. An impossible mission. Tiainen's plan was simple, yet brutal. Guerrilla warfare. Ambushes along forest trails. Snipers hidden in the snow. Ski commandos emerging from nowhere, striking and vanishing like ghosts. The Finns knew every tree, every rock, every shadow of that frozen land. But there were places even the Finns dared not go. The Kibini Mountains, peaks rising over 3,000 meters high. Dense, dark forests. Narrow corridors between black stone cliffs. The Sámi, pagan native people of the region, warned, don't climb the sacred mountains. The Atso dwell there, bear men, and the Viransusi, ancient werewolves who protect the land from invaders. The Soviets laughed. Primitive superstition, they said. Finnish propaganda meant to scare soldiers, they concluded. So, they sent in a reconnaissance company. Over 100 men. Experienced infantry. Armed with Mosin Nagant rifles, grenades, machine guns. They climbed the Kibini Mountains on a freezing January morning. Finnish observers, hidden miles away, watched the Soviet column move forward and did nothing. They just observed, counted the men, and waited. Why? Why would they allow the enemy to take such a valuable strategic position? The answer lay in superstition. Even the Finnish soldiers, Lutheran Christians, avoided those mountains. Something ancient lived there. Something even war dared not awaken. The Soviets set up defensive positions at the summit, made camp, lit fires, and waited for the main army to arrive. Then, night fell, and with it, something else came down from the frozen shadows of the mountains. The first nights were silent, bitter cold, 20 degrees below zero, 40 in just a few hours. The kind of cold that freezes your breath before it even leaves your lungs. The Soviet soldiers took turns on watch duty, eyes sharp for any Finnish movement, but the enemy never came. On the third night, the sounds began. At first, from afar. Howls, not ordinary wolves. Deeper, more intelligent, as if they were coordinating something. The Soviet soldiers laughed nervously. Wolves were a nuisance, not a threat to armed men. Then the howls came closer, and they brought something with them. The screams began around midnight. Human screams, desperate, cut off abruptly. Machine gun bursts tore through the silence. Grenade explosions echoed across the mountains. Finnish soldiers, positioned over a kilometer away, heard everything and understood nothing. Who was attacking? There were no Finnish units in that region. No patrol had been sent. So, who was fighting that battle? The gunfire lasted for hours. Screams, roars, sounds of something being ripped apart. Bones breaking, wood splintering. And then, silence. A silence more terrifying than any scream. The second night of attacks was worse. More screams, more gunfire. But this time, the Finnish soldiers heard something different. Words, pleas in Russian. "Pomagite! Pomagite! Help! Help!" And then, roars. Not from animals, from something bigger. Something that seemed to respond to the screams, as if it were hunting methodically, as if it knew exactly where each soldier was hiding. At dawn on the third day, Colonel Tainen ordered a reconnaissance patrol to investigate. 4 men, experienced skiers, trained snipers, men who had grown up hunting in Finland's forests. They climbed slowly, cautiously, and what they found made them question everything they believed about war. Blood, frozen, painting the snow red for hundreds of meters. It wasn't blood sprayed from bullet wounds. It was blood, poured out, gushed, as if ripped from bodies still alive. The bodies were scattered, not in defensive formation, in panic, running, trying to flee from something. But what truly horrified them was the condition of the corpses. Limbs torn off, not cut, ripped. Arms separated from torsos by brute force, legs twisted at impossible angles, heads. Some were missing entirely. Others were meters away from the bodies, frozen in expressions of absolute terror. Torsos hanging from tree branches, as if something had hurled the bodies with inhuman strength. Exposed ribs, internal organs strewn across the snow. And the most disturbing part, claw marks. Deep, massive. Too long to be wolves, too wide to be bears. One of the Finnish soldiers knelt near a body. He saw the scattered ammunition, dozens of spent shells, grenade pins. The Soviets had fought. They had resisted. They had fired at something. But there were no other bodies. No Finnish corpses. No dead animals. Nothing. As if the enemy couldn't die. Or worse, as if it had never even been wounded. The oldest soldier in the patrol, a Sámi man, looked at the markings in the snow, at the tracks, and his face went pale. He knew those signs. His grandfather had told him about them. His entire tribe feared them. He whispered only one word: Viron Susi. The other soldiers didn't understand at first, but when they saw the fear in the old man's eyes, they understood. It wasn't fear of an enemy, it was fear of something unnatural. The patrol descended quickly. It took them 2 full days to return. When they reached Finnish command, the report they delivered was impossible to believe. Over 100 Soviet soldiers dead, mutilated, slaughtered, and not a single Finnish casualty. No evidence of conventional combat. Major General Haglund read the report in silence, then simply said, "They met their fate. One way or another, I'd commend the men involved, if I knew who they were." But he knew the truth. No man had done this. Something older, something war had awakened, had hunted those invaders. And the question lingered in the air like a cursed whisper. If it wasn't the Finns, then who or what killed those men? The report reached Moscow. Stalin read it, and his reaction was silence. A silence that terrified generals more than any scream. He did not accept supernatural explanations. He didn't believe in monsters, but he also didn't accept incompetence. General Ivan Nikitich Khabarov was immediately removed from command. replaced, humiliated, not for losing a battle, but for failing to explain how 100 armed men were massacred without a single Finnish shot being fired. But far from the offices of Moscow, far from war maps and military strategies, another discussion was taking place. A much older, much more dangerous discussion. In the Sámi villages, around weak campfires, the elders spoke in hushed tones. They knew. They had always known. The mountains were sacred, protected, and those who desecrated them paid in blood. One of the elders, a shaman named Ilohash, spoke. The Russians didn't listen. We warned them. We told them the Viransusi would awaken, that the spirits of the forest do not forgive invaders. They laughed at us, called our beliefs primitive superstition. Another elder, even older, with ritual scars on his face, replied, "They are not just spirits. They are guardians, born from the very land itself. When blood is spilled on sacred ground, when war comes where it should not, they awaken and they hunt." But the discussion wasn't limited to the Sámi people. Among the Finnish soldiers themselves, the debate was intense. Lutheran Christians, rational men, trained for modern war. But now, confronted with something that defied everything they believed. One of the officers, a captain named Eero Makinen, a veteran of other battles, was arguing with a younger soldier in a frozen trench. "You saw the report, Eero. Over 100 bodies, torn apart. None of us were there. So who did it?" Makinen looked out at the snow-covered horizon. Wolves. It had to be wolves. A large pack. The Soviets were unprepared, freezing, and the animals attacked. Wolves that tear off heads, that throw bodies into trees, that coordinate attacks for 2 nights in a row. The young soldier shook his head. "That's not animal behavior, Captain. That's something else." Makinen didn't respond immediately. He too had grown up hearing the stories. He too knew there were places in Finland even the most experienced hunters avoided. Places where the forest watched back. If it wasn't wolves, if it was what the Sámi say, then that means we're fighting alongside something even the church can't explain. The young soldier looked toward the distant mountains, shrouded in mist. Or maybe it means there are forces in this world that don't need our permission to exist. Forces that protect this land from anyone who tries to conquer it. Elsewhere on the front line, a Finnish military chaplain, Father Mikael Virtanen, was trying to reconcile his faith with what was happening. He had blessed soldiers before battles. He had prayed for the dead. But now, he prayed for something different. "Lord, if evil can take physical form, if creatures of darkness can walk among us, then where is your light? Where is your protection?" But deep in his heart, a doubt was growing. What if it wasn't evil? What if it was justice? An ancient justice, pagan, older than Christianity. A justice that didn't distinguish between communist invaders or Christian ones. Only invaders. He remembered a passage a comparative mythology scholar had once told him. A quote from the French folklorist Claude Lecouteux. "The werewolf is not merely a creature of the night. It is the manifestation of nature's very wrath against those who violate her sacred laws." What if the Viransusi weren't demons, but guardians, protectors of an ancient pact between the land and those who respected it? That idea terrified him more than any monster, because it meant that God might not be the only power in the world, that there were older forces, forces that didn't answer to prayer, only to violation. Back at Finnish command, Major General Haglund called a secret meeting. Only high-ranking officers, only men he trusted. What happened in the Kibini Mountains cannot be made public, not to the Germans, not to the Allies, and certainly not to the press. If anyone learns that our territory harbors something like this, we'll be seen as primitive, superstitious. We'll lose international credibility. One of the colonels dared to ask, "But General, what if it happens again? What if the Soviets send more troops to that region?" Hägglund looked at him with a cold expression. "Then, we let the mountains defend themselves." The room went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. They were using something they neither controlled nor understood, as a weapon, a living weapon, ancient, and absolutely lethal. But the question remained, whispered only among the boldest or the most foolish. And when the war is over, will these creatures go back to sleep? Or will they keep hunting anyone who dares enter their territory? 3 weeks after the massacre, the Soviets didn't dare return to the Kibini Mountains. But the war went on. And curiosity is a curse worse than any wound. Captain Eero Makinen couldn't forget. The images from the report haunted him. The torn bodies, the claw marks, the frozen blood painting the snow. He needed to know. He needed to see it with his own eyes. Against direct orders, he decided to go up. He brought only 3 men with him, volunteers, or fools, maybe both. Among them was Juni, a young Sámi soldier who knew the old traditions. He tried to dissuade the captain. "Captain Makinen, my grandfather used to say that anyone who enters the sacred mountains at night never returns. Or returns different, changed. As if something had touched their soul, Makinen loaded his rifle. "I don't believe in curses, Juni. I believe in facts. And the fact is, 100 men died up there. If it was an animal, I need to know what kind. If it was something else, then I need to know what." They began the climb at dusk. The trail was covered in fresh snow, as if the mountain itself was trying to hide what had happened. The Soviet bodies were already partially buried under ice and snow, but the bloodstains were still there. Dark, deep, impossible to ignore. When they reached the old Soviet camp, they found the wreckage, torn tents, scattered equipment, abandoned weapons, and marks everywhere. Claw marks on the trees, deep gouges in the frozen wood. Juni knelt beside one of the marks, ran his fingers through the grooves. "This wasn't done by wolves, Captain. Or bears. This is bigger, stronger. And look here." He pointed to the base of the tree. "Fur, caught in the bark." Makinen picked up one of the strands. It was long, thick, dark gray with silver tips. Not common wolf fur, too dense, too wild. If it's an unknown animal, then it's a zoological discovery. If it's something else, he didn't finish the sentence. Night began to fall, and with it, the cold deepened. It wasn't just physical cold, it was something more. As if the very temperature was being pulled from the air, as if something was watching. They set up camp in a clearing, lit a small fire, took turns keeping watch. But no one slept. The silence was oppressive. No wind, no animal sounds, nothing. As if the entire forest was holding its breath. Around midnight, the first sound came. It wasn't a howl. It was something between a growl and a scream. Low, deep, coming from multiple directions at once, as if they were surrounded. The 4 men grabbed their weapons, backs to backs, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. "There," one of the soldiers pointed, "between the trees, shadows moving, but not ordinary shadows. They were big, too big, walking on 2 legs, but not like humans, like something that used to be human, but forgot how." Juni whispered a prayer in Sámi, an old prayer, one banned by the church, a prayer to the spirits of the forest, asking forgiveness, asking passage. The shadows stopped, as if they were listening. And then, one of them stepped out of the darkness. Mäkinen saw it, and his mind refused to process it. It was impossible, absurd, but it was there, right in front of him. It had the shape of a man, but it wasn't a man. It was far too large. 2 meters tall, maybe more, covered in dark, coarse fur, muscles visible beneath the hair. But the face was the worst. Partially human, partially lupine. Yellow eyes, glowing, intelligent. A mouth full of long, sharp fangs. And worst of all, there was something in those eyes. Not just animal rage, but recognition. As if the creature knew exactly who they were and why they were there. Mäkinen raised his rifle. His hands trembled. Not from the cold, from a primal fear. The kind of fear no military training can erase. The fear of standing before a superior predator. The creature tilted its head, like a curious wolf. And then, it spoke. Not words, not exactly. A guttural sound, a growl. But there was rhythm, intention, as if it was trying to communicate. Joni understood. He whispered to Mäkinen. It's asking why we came, why we violated sacred ground. How the hell do you know that? Because my people know this language. It's ancient, older than words. It's the language of the earth. Mäkinen lowered the rifle slightly. Not all the way, but enough to show he wasn't attacking. Not yet. Tell it. We're not invaders. We're defending our land. The Russians came first, Juni translated. Not in words, in sounds, in guttural growls that Mäkinen didn't even know a human could produce. The creature listened, and then roared. But it wasn't a roar of anger. It was a roar of agreement, recognition. More shadows emerged from the trees. 3, 4, 5 creatures. All the same, all impossible, all real. One of them approached, sniffed the air near Mäkinen, and then simply turned away, as if it had decided he wasn't a threat, or worse, that he wasn't worth hunting. The creatures retreated, merging once again with the darkness of the forest. But before disappearing completely, the first creature looked back, and Mäkinen swore. He swore he saw something human in those eyes, something sad, something lonely. When dawn came, the 4 men descended the mountain in silence. No one spoke of what they saw. No one could. How do you explain something like that? How do you put into words an experience that defies all logic? When they returned to command, Mäkinen was reprimanded for disobeying orders. But he didn't care. He had seen the truth. And the truth was more terrifying than any war. That night, alone in his tent, he wrote in his journal, I don't know if I saw demons or gods. I don't know if they were monsters or guardians. But I know one thing. They are not on our side, nor on the Russians. They are on the side of the land. And as long as we respect that, maybe they'll let us live. March 13th, 1940. The Winter War was over. The Moscow Peace Treaty was signed. Finland lost territory, but it survived. The Soviet Union, with all its overwhelming military might, failed to fully conquer that small country. Officially, it was due to Finnish guerrilla tactics, their expertise in winter combat, lethal snipers like Simo Häyhä, ghostly ski commandos. But in the classified reports, in the files never opened to the public, there was another reason. A reason Stalin ordered to be buried. Permanently. During those 3.5 months of war, more than 200,000 Soviet soldiers died, most in conventional combat, many from hypothermia and extreme weather. But some simply vanished. Entire patrols, reconnaissance units, soldiers who entered certain regions and were never seen again. The Kibini Mountains were never occupied again, not by the Soviets, Not by the Finns, a silent agreement, unwritten, unofficial, but respected. Major General Hagelin took the secret to his grave. When asked about the massacre of the 100 Soviet soldiers, he always gave the same answer. They met their fate, one way or another. Captain Eero Makinen never slept soundly again. Until the end of his life, he would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing distant howls that existed only in his memory. He never officially spoke of what he saw that night in the mountains, but in his journal, discovered decades after his death, there was a sketch, a drawing of a creature, half man, half wolf, and beneath it a single sentence. They are not monsters. They are the land itself, defending itself. Juni, the Sámi soldier, returned to his village after the war. The elders welcomed him with reverence. They knew. They had always known. He had seen the Viransusi and survived. That made him different, marked. He became a shaman, and until his death, he performed rituals at the edges of the Kibini Mountains, not to drive the creatures away, but to honor them, to give thanks. In 1941, the Soviet Union invaded Finland again, and again. Certain regions were carefully avoided, direct orders from Moscow. No official explanation. Just, do not enter the areas marked on the map. The Germans, Finland's allies during the Continuation War, asked why. The Finns simply answered, "Trust us. There are places even war dares not tread." And the Germans believed them, because some of their own soldiers who ventured near those mountains came back with stories. Stories of howls, of impossible shadows, of comrades disappearing during the night. Today, the Kibini Mountains still stand. Tourists visit. Skiers descend their slopes. But the Sámi people still perform their rituals, still leave offerings at the forest's edge, still tell their children stories of the Viransusi, and every so often, every once in a while, lone travelers report something strange, tracks too large to be from wolves, howls that sound almost human, shadows walking upright between the trees. Skeptics call it folklore, imagination, cultural remnants of ancient pagan beliefs. But the military records still exist, buried in classified archives, reports of missing patrols, bodies found in impossible conditions, veteran soldiers refusing to enter certain areas, even under threat of court-martial. And one question remains, a question no historian can answer satisfactorily. How did a nation of 160,000 soldiers manage to resist 450,000 invaders? How did the Finns inflict such devastating losses with so few of their own? The official answer speaks of courage, of strategy, of terrain knowledge. But the unofficial answer, the one whispered around winter campfires, the one the Sámi have known forever, is different. They didn't fight alone, because there are forces in this world older than empires, older than ideologies, older than humanity itself. Forces that sleep in the mountains, in deep forests, in sacred places civilization has not yet fully defiled. And when those places are violated, when blood is spilled on sacred ground, when invaders march where they should not, those forces awaken, and they hunt, not out of malice, not out of bloodlust, but because it is their nature, their function, their ancient purpose, to protect, to defend, to eliminate threats. The werewolf is not just a legend, not just folklore. It is an archetype, a symbol of nature's primal rage against those who violate her sacred laws. And perhaps, just perhaps, in remote places, in lands not yet corrupted by modernity, that archetype still walks, still breathes, still waits, waiting for the next invader, the next violation, the next war. And if that's true, then the question isn't if the Virensusi exist. The question is, what happens when we awaken too many of them, and there are no sacred mountains left for them to sleep in? If you want more forgotten secrets of history to be revealed, leave a like, subscribe, and get ready. Because this was only the beginning. There are other wars, other unexplained massacres, other places where the line between history and horror completely disappears. And we will find them.